I should have listened to her. That's what I keep telling myself now, in the suffocating quiet of these long, empty nights. I should have listened when she pressed that napkin into my palm with trembling fingers, her eyes wild with something I couldn't name then but recognize now as pure, unadulterated terror. But I didn't. I was too tired, too broken, too convinced that nothing worse could happen to me than what already had. And that arrogance, that bone-deep exhaustion that made me think I'd already survived the worst, nearly cost me everything. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you sitting in your living room, maybe avoiding something you don't want to face? Are you in bed, scrolling because sleep won't come? Drop a comment and tell me. Because what I'm about to share with you, this thing that happened to me on Flight 447 from Phoenix to Portland, it could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that'll make your blood run cold and your heart race, check the description box below. You'll find links to other true accounts that'll keep you up at night, I promise you that. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Diane Kellerman, and I'm 63 years old, though some days I feel ancient and others I feel like I'm still that naive 25-year-old who thought she knew everything about love and loyalty. I'm a retired high school English teacher from Tucson, Arizona, a widow of 7 years, and a mother of 1 son. Though after what I'm about to tell you, I'm not sure I can call myself that anymore. Not in any way that matters. The Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport was packed that Tuesday morning in late September, the kind of crowded that makes you feel both completely alone and suffocated by humanity all at once. I'd been visiting my younger sister, Patricia, who'd just had her second hip replacement and needed help around the house. 3 weeks I'd been there, cooking her meals, helping her with physical therapy exercises, listening to her complain about her ungrateful children who couldn't be bothered to visit. The irony of that wasn't lost on me, given what was waiting for me back in Portland. My son, Ethan. My beautiful, brilliant, damaged boy who'd grown into a man I no longer recognized. I hadn't seen him in person for almost 14 months, not since that awful Christmas when he'd shown up at my door with a woman I'd never met, some stick-thin blonde named Trisha or Trina or something equally forgettable, and announced they were engaged. The whole visit had been tense, filled with barbed comments and long silences. He'd asked me for money. Again. $20,000 this time, for some investment opportunity that he swore would triple his returns in 6 months. When I'd refused, gently, trying not to wound his pride, he'd exploded. Called me selfish. Called me a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see him happy. Called me worse things than that, things a son should never say to his mother. We hadn't spoken since. Not really. Just cold, brief text messages. Logistics. Did you get the holiday card? Yes. I'm thinking of selling the house. Okay. But 2 days before my flight back to Portland, he'd called. Actually called. His voice was different, softer, younger somehow, like the Ethan I used to know before his father died and everything went to hell. He'd apologized. Said he'd been under tremendous stress. Said he wanted to make things right. Said he loved me and missed me and would I please let him pick me up from the airport when I got back? I'd cried after that call. Ugly, heaving sobs that made Patricia shuffle in with her walker and hold me while I fell apart. I'd wanted so badly to believe him. Needed to believe that my son was still in there somewhere, beneath all the anger and resentment and whatever darkness had taken root in him. So I'd said yes. Yes, he could pick me up. Yes, we could have dinner and talk. Yes, I forgave him. God, I was such a fool. The security line took 45 minutes, and by the time I got to my gate, I was already exhausted. My lower back ached, a chronic condition that no amount of physical therapy or expensive mattresses could fix, and my feet were swollen in my sensible walking shoes. I'd worn my comfortable travel clothes, navy blue slacks, a soft cream-colored sweater, my late husband's old Stanford University windbreaker that I couldn't bring myself to throw away even though the zipper was broken and it smelled like mothballs. Gate B17. Flight 447 to Portland. Departure time, 11:45 a.m. I found a seat near the window and watched the planes take off and land, these massive metal birds defying gravity, and thought about Ethan. About the way he used to be. The little boy who'd bring me dandelions from the yard and call them wishes. The teenager who'd won the state science fair 3 years running. The young man who'd held my hand at his father's funeral and promised me we'd be okay, that we'd get through it together. When did it change? When did he become someone I didn't know? The boarding process was chaotic, as it always is. I was in Group 4, so I waited while the first-class passengers and frequent flyers filed past, dragging their oversized carry-ons and designer backpacks. When my group was finally called, I gathered my purse, a worn leather bag that had been a 20th anniversary gift from Thomas, and my small rolling suitcase and joined the shuffling line. Seat 17F. Window seat. I always request window seats, not because I enjoy the view particularly, but because it means fewer people climbing over me to use the bathroom. I settled in, stowed my bag under the seat in front of me, and buckled my seatbelt. The plane was maybe 3/4 full, which meant I'd have the middle seat empty. Small mercies. The flight attendants went through their safety routine, the one nobody ever pays attention to, and I closed my eyes, trying to will away the headache that was forming behind my left eye. I'd forgotten to eat breakfast. Patricia had made oatmeal, but I'd been too anxious about the flight to eat more than a few bites. The engines roared. The plane lurched backward, then forward. We taxied toward the runway. And that's when I first saw her. She was one of the flight attendants, maybe in her early 50s, with dark auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun and a face that might have been pretty if it wasn't so pinched with worry. She was doing the final safety check, walking down the aisle with mechanical efficiency, but her eyes, God, her eyes were darting everywhere, frantic, like she was looking for something. Or someone. When she passed my row, our eyes met for just a second. And I swear, I saw fear there. Raw, primal fear. But then she was gone, moving toward the back of the plane, and I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress. Exhaustion. The headache. We took off without incident. The plane climbed steeply, my ears popped, and Phoenix fell away beneath us, a sprawling grid of tan and brown and the occasional splash of pool blue. I'd brought a book, some mystery novel Patricia had recommended, but I couldn't focus on it. Instead, I stared out the window at the clouds and thought about what I'd say to Ethan when I saw him. We need to talk about your father. About the life insurance money you think I'm hoarding. About the house and the will and all the things you've accused me of. We need to talk about why you hate me so much. 30 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign dinged off. People immediately started getting up, stretching, heading to the bathrooms. I stayed put, still staring out the window, when I felt it. A presence next to me. I turned, and there she was. The auburn-haired flight attendant, standing in the aisle, her face pale and damp with sweat despite the aggressive air conditioning. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, clutching something in her hand. "Can I help you?" I asked, confused. She glanced over her shoulder, then quickly bent down, pretending to adjust something in the overhead compartment. And that's when she dropped it. A white cocktail napkin, folded in half. It landed on my lap. I looked down at it, then up at her. She was staring at me with such intensity that I felt pinned to my seat. Then she mouthed 2 words, so clearly that there was no mistaking them. Read it. Before I could respond, she straightened up and hurried away, back toward the galley. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the napkin. The handwriting was cramped, frantic, written in blue pen with such pressure that it had almost torn through the paper in places. Pretend to be sick. Get off this plane. Please. You're in danger. My first thought wasn't fear. It was annoyance. I know that sounds strange, maybe even callous, but you have to understand the headspace I was in. I was 63 years old, chronically exhausted, emotionally wrung out from 3 weeks of playing nursemaid to my sister, and desperate to get home to my own bed, my own life, my own quiet. The last thing I needed was some dramatic flight attendant playing pranks or having a mental breakdown or whatever this was. I stared at the napkin for a long moment, reading those words over and over, trying to make sense of them. Pretend to be sick. Get off this plane. Please. You're in danger. Danger from what? From whom? It was absurd. Ridiculous. This wasn't some thriller movie where mysterious strangers passed cryptic warnings to unsuspecting travelers. This was real life. My real life. And real life was mundane and predictable and absolutely not the kind of thing where danger lurked at 30,000 feet. I crumpled the napkin in my fist and shoved it into the seat pocket in front of me, between the safety card and the Sky Mall catalog that nobody ever reads. My heart was racing, though, and that annoyed me even more. Why was I letting this get to me? If you're still watching, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to tell you gets so much worse, and you're going to want to stick around for what happens next. Trust me. And remember to check the description box for more stories that'll make you question everything you think you know about the people in your life. I tried to go back to my book, but the words swam on the page, meaningless. I kept glancing toward the galley, looking for the auburn-haired flight attendant, but she'd disappeared. There were 2 other attendants working the flight, a young man with perfectly styled dark hair and an older woman with gray streaks and deep laugh lines around her mouth, but no sign of the one who'd given me the napkin. Maybe she was in the bathroom. Maybe she was genuinely unwell. Maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding. The man sitting across the aisle from me, middle-aged, wearing a rumpled business suit and reading something on his iPad, caught me staring and gave me a polite nod. I nodded back and quickly looked away, embarrassed. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The plane hummed along, steady and unremarkable. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional, announcing our altitude and estimated arrival time. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. I was being paranoid. But then she came back. I didn't see her approach this time. I was looking out the window, watching the cloud formations, when I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped, actually jumped, and turned to find her crouched next to my seat, her face so close to mine that I could smell the mint on her breath. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, desperate. "Please, you have to listen to me." I pulled back, instinctively. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice low so the other passengers wouldn't hear. "I think you've confused me with someone else." "I haven't." Her grip on my shoulder tightened. "I know exactly who you are. You're Diane Kellerman. You live at 4782 Maple Creek Drive in Portland. Your husband was Thomas Kellerman. He died 7 years ago from a heart attack. You have a son, Ethan." The blood drained from my face. "How do you?" "There isn't time to explain." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "You need to pretend you're having a medical emergency. Tell them you're having chest pains. They'll have to land the plane. They'll have to let you off." I wanted to pull away, to call for help, but I was frozen. "Why? What's happening? I don't understand." "I'm begging you." Her voice broke. "My name is Linda. Linda Parrish. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know what he was planning until this morning. I thought, he told me it was just supposed to be a scare tactic, a way to—" She stopped, glancing over her shoulder again, her whole body tense. "He's going to kill you. My son is going to kill you." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "Your son." I repeated stupidly. "Ethan." She grabbed both my shoulders now, shaking me slightly. "Ethan Kellerman is my son. From before. Before your husband. I gave him up when he was 3 because I couldn't. I was young and stupid and addicted to things I shouldn't have been, and the state took him away and he went into foster care and eventually your husband adopted him when he married you. And I've been watching him for years, trying to reconnect, and he found me 6 months ago and I thought he wanted a relationship, I thought he wanted to know me, but he doesn't, he just wanted." "Stop." I shoved her hands off me. "Stop it. You're insane. Ethan's biological mother died in a car accident when he was a baby. That's what Thomas told me. That's what the adoption papers said." "Thomas lied." Her voice was flat now, dead. "I didn't die. I cleaned up. I got sober. I've been working for Southwest Airlines for 18 years. And Ethan tracked me down through some genealogy website, and I was so happy, I thought I was getting a second chance, but he's not." She choked on whatever she was about to say. "He's not well. He's not *right star. And he's been planning this for months. The life insurance. Your house. Everything you have. He wants it all. And I didn't understand what he meant until he told me this morning that you'd be on this flight and I needed to. He said I needed to look the other way when it happened, and I—" "When what happened?" My voice came out as a hiss. She opened her mouth to answer, but a voice cut through the cabin, sharp and authoritative. "Linda, we need you in the galley. Now." I looked up. The gray-haired flight attendant was standing in the aisle, her expression stern. She wasn't looking at Linda. She was looking at me. And there was something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. Linda stood slowly, her face crumpling. "Please," she whispered one more time. "Please don't get off this plane at the scheduled stop. There's someone waiting for you there. Someone Ethan sent." Then she turned and walked away, following the other attendant toward the back of the plane. I sat there, trembling, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Linda Parrish, if that was even her real name, was clearly disturbed. Delusional. Maybe she'd fixated on me for some reason, done some research, found out details about my life through social media or public records, and constructed this elaborate fantasy about being Ethan's birth mother. But even as I tried to convince myself of that, doubt crept in. Because there were things Linda had said that I'd never posted online. Details about Thomas's death. The exact address of my house, an address I'd deliberately kept private, using a P.O. box for all my mail, ever since some of Ethan's friends from his wilder days had shown up asking for money. And the way she'd said Ethan's name. With such pain. Such intimate, gut-wrenching knowledge. Asterisk his not right. Asterisk. I'd thought that myself, hadn't I? In my darkest moments, in the sleepless nights after Thomas died and Ethan started changing, becoming someone cold and calculating and cruel, I'd wondered if there was something fundamentally broken in him. Something I'd missed or ignored or failed to fix because I'd been so desperate to believe he was just grieving, just lost, just temporarily off course. My hands found the napkin in the seat pocket. I pulled it out and read it again. Asterisk you're in danger. Asterisk. The man across the aisle was looking at me again. This time, his expression was concerned. Are you all right? You look very pale. I managed a weak smile. I'm fine. Just air sickness. He nodded sympathetically and went back to his iPad. But I wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. I needed to think. I needed to decide if I believed Linda Parrish or if I was going to dismiss her as a lunatic and forget this whole thing ever happened. The plane gave a slight shudder, turbulence, and I gripped the armrests. Outside the window, the clouds had thickened, gray and roiling. We were somewhere over Northern California now, maybe an hour from Portland. An hour from landing. An hour from seeing Ethan, who'd be waiting for me at baggage claim with that new, soft voice and his apologies and his promises. Asterisk there's someone waiting for you there. Someone Ethan sent. Asterisk. No. No, I wouldn't believe it. I couldn't. But what if it was true? What if my son, my beautiful, brilliant, damaged boy, really was planning to kill me? I want you to understand something before I go any further. I loved my son. I loved him with a ferocity that terrified me sometimes, the kind of love that makes you do stupid things and ignore obvious warnings because you can't bear the alternative. The alternative being that you've raised a monster, that you've failed in the most fundamental way a parent can fail. So sitting there on that plane, with Linda Parrish's napkin crushed in my fist and her words echoing in my head, I did what I'd always done when it came to Ethan. I made excuses. I rationalized. I told myself a different story. The turbulence picked up, and the pilot's voice came over the intercom again, asking everyone to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. The cabin lights flickered once, twice, and a few passengers gasped. I barely noticed. I was too busy spiraling into my own memories, trying to find evidence that would prove Linda wrong. Ethan had been 7 when Thomas and I married. I'd been teaching at Roosevelt High School in Portland for 3 years, living in a cramped studio apartment and eating ramen noodles more nights than I'd like to admit, when Thomas walked into my life. He'd been a widower, or so I'd thought, raising a son alone while working as an architect for a mid-sized firm downtown. We'd met at a parent-teacher conference. His son wasn't in my class, but we'd struck up a conversation in the hallway, and there'd been something about him. Something steady and kind and utterly exhausted that I recognized because I felt it too. We dated for 8 months before he proposed. Quick, maybe, but we weren't kids. We knew what we wanted. Thomas wanted a partner. I wanted a family. And Ethan. God, Ethan had been such a sweet child at first. Quiet. Almost too quiet. He'd call me Miss Diane in this formal little voice, and he'd draw me pictures of houses with perfect symmetry and flowers that all had exactly 5 petals. Thomas told me Ethan's mother had died when he was 2. A drunk driver, a rainy night, an intersection where she'd had the right of way but never made it through. He'd shown me pictures of her, a young woman with strawberry blonde hair and a shy smile, holding baby Ethan at what looked like a park. Her name had been Jennifer, he'd said. Jennifer Moore. She'd been 24 when she died. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? Thomas wasn't a liar. He was the most honest man I'd ever known, almost painfully so. If he told me Jennifer was dead, then Jennifer was dead. But was she? I thought about the woman in those photographs now, trying to recall details. Had she looked anything like Linda Parrish? I couldn't remember. The photos had been in an album Thomas kept in his office, and after he died, Ethan had taken it. Said he wanted to have memories of his real mother. The way he'd said real had stung, but I'd let it go. Grief makes people say things they don't mean. Or maybe he'd meant it exactly. The early years of our marriage had been good. Happy. Even. Thomas was a wonderful husband, attentive without being smothering, and he'd seemed genuinely grateful to have me in his life. Ethan adjusted slowly. He started calling me Mom when he was 9, tentatively at first, like he was testing the word to see if I'd reject it. I'd cried the first time, pulled him into a hug and told him I loved him and I'd always be there for him. I'd meant it. God help me, I'd meant every word. But there were signs, even then, that something wasn't quite right. Little things I'd dismissed as typical boy behavior or effects of losing his mother so young. He'd been obsessed with control. His room had to be organized just so, his books arranged by height, his clothes folded in precise squares. If I moved something, even accidentally, he'd have a meltdown that could last hours. Thomas said it was his way of coping with chaos, of feeling safe. We'd taken him to a child psychologist who diagnosed him with mild OCD and anxiety. Manageable. Treatable. He'd been cruel to animals. I'd caught him once, when he was 10, holding our neighbor's cat by its tail, swinging it in slow circles while the poor thing yowled. When I'd shouted at him to stop, he'd looked at me with this blank expression and said, I was just seeing how long it would take for it to stop fighting. We'd had a long talk that night, Thomas and I, about empathy and consequences. Ethan had cried and apologized and promised never to do it again. We'd believed him. We'd wanted to believe him. In middle school, he'd gotten into fights. Lots of them. But it was never his fault, according to him. The other kids were bullies. They'd started it. He was just defending himself. And because Ethan was small for his age and got straight A's and had that quiet, wounded thing about him, the teachers believed him. So did we. High school was when things got complicated. He'd found his people, a group of smart, disaffected kids who wore black and listened to angry music and spent their weekends doing God knows what. His grades stayed perfect, though. That was the thing. No matter what chaos swirled around him, Ethan's grades never slipped. It was like he existed in two separate worlds. The one where he was a genius with a bright future, and the one where he was something darker, something I couldn't quite see clearly. Thomas had a heart attack when Ethan was 22. Massive. Fatal. 1 minute he was mowing the lawn, and the next he was on the ground, clutching his chest, his face gray. I'd called 911, but it was too late. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. The life insurance payout was substantial. $350,000. Thomas had wanted to make sure Ethan and I would be taken care of, that we wouldn't have to worry about money while we grieved. It was sitting in an account, untouched except for the mortgage payments and basic living expenses, because I couldn't bring myself to spend it. It felt like blood money somehow. Like spending it would mean accepting that Thomas was really gone. Ethan had asked for access to it multiple times. He'd had plans. Investment opportunities. Business ventures. I'd always said no. The money was for emergencies, for his future, for when he was really ready to settle down and start a life. Not for get-rich-quick schemes and impulsive decisions. He'd resented me for it. I could see it in the way he looked at me, like I was some miser hoarding treasure that rightfully belonged to him. And maybe, in his mind, that's exactly what I was. The turbulence stopped as suddenly as it had started. The seatbelt sign dinged off again, but this time, nobody got up. The cabin had taken on a strange, tense atmosphere, like everyone could sense that something was wrong even if they couldn't name what it was. I needed to use the bathroom. Not because I actually had to go, but because I needed to move, to do something, to shake off this creeping dread that was settling into my bones. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stood, legs shaky, and made my way down the aisle toward the lavatory at the back of the plane. As I passed the galley, I saw Linda. She was sitting on a small jump seat, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The gray-haired flight attendant was standing next to her, one hand on her shoulder, speaking in low, urgent tones. Neither of them looked at me as I passed. The bathroom was tiny and claustrophobic, smelling of recycled air and industrial cleaning products. I locked the door and leaned against the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked old. When had I gotten so old? My hair, which had once been a rich chestnut brown, was now mostly grey, and I'd stopped dyeing it years ago because it felt like too much effort. My face was lined, my eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I looked like someone who'd been beaten down by life and was too tired to get back up. Is that what Ethan saw when he looked at me? A tired old woman standing between him and the life he thought he deserved? I splashed water on my face, trying to clear my head. Think, Diane. Think. If Linda was telling the truth, if she really was Ethan's biological mother and if he really was planning something, then what were my options? I could tell the pilot. Demand an emergency landing. But what would I say? A flight attendant gave me a napkin and said my son wants to kill me. They'd think I was insane. Hell, I thought I was insane. I could call Ethan. Right now. From the plane. Ask him point blank if Linda Parrish had contacted him, if he knew who she was. But if he was planning something, he'd just lie. He'd always been a good liar. Smooth. Convincing. Or I could do nothing. Land in Portland. Get off the plane. Face whatever was waiting for me and hope that Linda was wrong. A knock on the door made me jump. Are you all right in there? It was the male flight attendant. His voice was professional but tinged with concern. Yes, I called back. I'm fine. Just a moment. I dried my face with a paper towel and took a deep breath. Then I opened the door. He was standing right there, closer than I expected, and I had to step back into the bathroom slightly to avoid bumping into him. Sorry, he said, smiling. Just wanted to make sure you were okay. You've been in there a while. Had I? I'd lost track of time. I'm okay, I said. Thank you. But as I moved past him, back toward my seat, I caught something. A look. Just for a second, his eyes flicked toward Linda in the galley, then back to me, and there was something in that look that made my skin crawl. Knowledge. He knew. Whatever was happening, he knew. I walked faster, practically stumbling back to my seat, and buckled myself in with shaking hands. This was real. This was actually happening. And I had less than an hour to figure out what to do about it. I need you to do something for me right now. I need you to think about the person in your life you trust most. Your mother, your sister, your best friend, your child. Picture their face. Picture them saying, I love you. I would never hurt you. Now imagine discovering that everything they ever said was a lie. That's where I was. That's where Linda Parrish had dragged me in the space of 45 minutes. The plane droned on. We were somewhere over Oregon now, descending gradually, the pilot's voice occasionally crackling over the intercom with updates about weather conditions and landing procedures. Portland was notorious for rain, and today was no exception. I could see it through the window, dark clouds, sheets of water obscuring the ground below. I kept my eyes on the galley. Linda was still sitting on that jump seat, but the grey-haired attendant had moved away, and now the male attendant was talking to her. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but his body language was aggressive. He was leaning over her, one hand braced against the wall, his face inches from hers. She was shaking her head, pulling away, but he grabbed her arm, not gently, and yanked her to her feet. No one else seemed to notice. The other passengers were absorbed in their phones, their books, their movies. The woman in front of me was asleep, head lolled to one side, mouth slightly open. The man across the aisle was still on his iPad, tapping away at something. I was the only one watching. The only one who saw Linda stumble as the male attendant pulled her toward the rear of the plane, past the bathroom, toward the very back where I assumed there was some kind of crew area. And then they were gone, disappearing behind a curtain. My heart was hammering now. I should do something. I should call out, ask if she's okay, demand to know what's going on. But what if I was wrong? What if this was all perfectly innocent and I was just some paranoid old woman making a scene? But what if I wasn't wrong? The minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 15. Linda didn't come back. I couldn't sit still anymore. I unbuckled my seatbelt, again, even though the sign was on now, telling us all to remain seated for landing, and stood up. The woman next to me, who'd boarded late and immediately fallen asleep with headphones on, didn't stir. I stepped over her carefully and moved down the aisle. Toward the back. Toward the curtain. My legs felt like water. Every step took monumental effort. I kept expecting someone to stop me, to tell me to sit down, but the grey-haired attendant was nowhere in sight, and the other passengers were all focused on their descent routines, tightening seatbelts, stowing belongings, preparing to land. I reached the curtain. Paused. I could hear voices on the other side. Low. Urgent. Told you to stay out of it. The male attendant. His voice was hard, cold. I can't. Linda. She was crying. She's innocent. She doesn't deserve. She's a mark. That's all she is. And you're going to keep your mouth shut and do your job, or I swear to God. I pulled the curtain aside. They both froze. Linda was pressed against the wall, mascara streaking down her face. The male attendant had her wrist in his grip, twisted at an angle that looked painful. When he saw me, his expression shifted so fast it was dizzying, from fury to concern in half a second. He released Linda's wrist immediately and stepped toward me, all professional courtesy. You need to return to your seat. We're beginning our descent. I ignored him. Looked straight at Linda. What's happening? Tell me the truth. Right now. Linda's eyes were wild, darting between me and the attendant. I can't. Yes, you can. I stepped further into the small space, even though every instinct was screaming at me to run. You said Ethan is your son. You said he's planning to kill me. I need to know if that's true. The male attendant's mask slipped. Just for a second, I saw rage flash across his face. Linda, do not. He paid us. The words burst out of Linda like she'd been holding them in for so long she couldn't anymore. Ethan paid us. Me, because I'm his mother and he knew I'd do anything to have a relationship with him. And Derek here because Derek is, she laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. He's Ethan's friend. They've known each other for years. Ethan got him this job, pulled strings, called in favors. And 3 months ago, Ethan told me he needed my help with something. Said he was in trouble. He said you were abusive, controlling, that you'd stolen his inheritance and he needed to access it before you drained it all. He made it sound like, God, he made it sound like he was the victim. Shut up. Derek's voice was low, dangerous. Shut up right now. But Linda was past caring. He said we just needed to scare you. Make you think you were in danger so you'd change your will, give him power of attorney. He said it wouldn't go beyond that. But this morning, he called me and told me the plan had changed. Said you'd be on this flight and I needed to, her voice broke. I needed to look the other way when someone met you at baggage claim. Someone who'd make sure you never made it out of the airport. The world tilted. I reached out, grabbing the wall for support. Who's meeting me? I don't know. You're lying. My voice came out stronger than I felt. If Ethan told you all of this, he told you who? Linda's face crumpled. A man. That's all I know. Someone Ethan hired. He said it would look like a robbery gone wrong. That Portland's airport has had issues with crime lately and no one would question it. You'd just be another statistic. I couldn't breathe. The tiny space was closing in on me, the walls pressing closer. This couldn't be real. My son, my boy who I'd raised, who I'd loved, who I'd sacrificed everything for, couldn't have done this. Couldn't have planned this. But even as I tried to deny it, pieces were falling into place. The phone call 2 days ago, so uncharacteristically warm and apologetic. His insistence on picking me up from the airport personally. The way he'd ask specifically which flight I'd be on, what time I'd land. He'd set this up. All of it. Derek lunged forward, and for a horrible second I thought he was going to hit me. But instead he reached past me, yanking the curtain closed. Both of you need to shut up. Now. He was sweating, I noticed. Beads of moisture on his forehead despite the cool cabin air. Linda, you're going to go back out there and finish this flight like everything is normal. And you, he jabbed a finger at me. You're going to sit down and keep quiet. When we land, you're going to get off this plane and walk to baggage claim and whatever happens next is none of your business. Do you understand? Why would you do this? I stared at him, trying to understand. How much did he pay you? A muscle in his jaw twitched. Enough. Enough to murder someone? Enough to help kill a woman who never did anything to you? You don't get it. His voice was tight. Ethan's my friend. Has been since college. He's been there for me through some really dark shit, and when he asked for help, I said yes. That's what friends do. Friends don't ask friends to commit murder. I'm not committing anything. I'm just making sure Linda here doesn't ruin everything. He glanced at Linda with disgust. I told Ethan his junkie mother was a liability, but he insisted she could handle it. Linda flinched like she'd been slapped. I've been sober for 19 years. Once an addict, always an addict. Derek's smile was cruel. And now you're going to prove me right by keeping your mouth shut and letting this play out. Because if you don't, Ethan knows where you live. He knows where you work. And he knows exactly how to make your life a living hell. You think this is the first time he's planned something like this? My blood went cold. What does that mean? Derek's eyes slid to me, and I saw calculation there, weighing how much to say. Nothing. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget. Wouldn't forget. What else has he done? Silence. Then Linda whispered, his girlfriend. The one he brought to see you at Christmas. Trisha. Her name was Tessa. Linda's voice was hollow. She disappeared 3 months ago. They said she left town, went to stay with family in California. But she didn't have any family. Ethan told me, he was drinking one night, and he told me she'd threatened to go to the police about some investment scheme he was running. Said she was going to ruin everything. And then she just vanished. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Are you saying he killed her? I'm saying she's gone and no one's looking for her. Linda's eyes were dead. I'm saying I've watched my son turn into someone I don't recognize, and I've been too scared to do anything about it because what kind of mother turns in her own child? What kind of mother admits she gave birth to a monster? The same kind of mother who raises one, I thought. The same kind who makes excuses and looks away and tells herself it's not that bad, he's just going through a phase, he'll grow out of it. You need to return to your seat immediately. Derek's voice had taken on a desperate edge. The seatbelt sign is on. If you don't go back, I'll have to report you to the captain, and trust me, you don't want that kind of attention right now. He was right. Drawing attention to myself wouldn't help. But neither would sitting quietly and walking into whatever trap Ethan had set. Think, Diane. Think. Fine. I stepped back, letting the curtain fall open. I'll go back to my seat. Derek relaxed slightly, but I saw Linda's face fall. She'd been hoping I'd fight harder, make more noise, force some kind of confrontation that would bring everything into the open. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had a plan. I walked back down the aisle, my mind racing. The plane was definitely descending now. I could feel the change in air pressure, the way my ears were starting to pop. Through the windows, I could see we were below the cloud cover, the lights of Portland emerging through the rain. 15 minutes. Maybe 20. That's all I had. I slid back into my seat and pulled out my phone. It was on airplane mode, but I turned it off, waiting for it to connect to any available signal. Risky, technically against regulations, but no one was paying attention. The cabin was full of people doing the same thing, checking messages, preparing for landing. The phone found a signal. Weak, but there. 1 bar. I pulled up Ethan's contact. His smiling face stared back at me from the profile picture. A photo from 5 years ago, before Thomas died, when he'd still looked like my son and not whatever he'd become. I started typing a text, then stopped. What would I even say? I know you're planning to kill me. He'd just deny it. Or worse, accelerate whatever he had planned. Instead, I opened my email and scrolled through recent messages. Bills. Spam. A newsletter from the Portland Library. And then, I stopped. An email from my lawyer, Brenda Morrison. We'd been discussing updating my will, making some changes to how my estate would be distributed. I told her I wanted to think about it for a few more weeks before making any final decisions. I hadn't told Ethan about any of this. But what if he'd found out somehow? What if he'd hacked my email or gone through my papers when he'd visited at Christmas? The current will left everything to him. The house, the life insurance money, my retirement savings, everything. It had seemed obvious at the time. He was my only child. Who else would I leave it to? But Brenda had suggested I might want to consider other options. Charities. Scholarships in Thomas's name. Provisions that would give Ethan access to the money gradually, with oversight, rather than all at once. I'd been resistant to the idea because it felt like I didn't trust him. Like I was treating him like a child who couldn't be trusted with his inheritance. Now I realized I'd been right not to trust him. I clicked on Brenda's email and hit reply. My fingers shook as I typed. Brenda, this is urgent. I need to change my will immediately. I'm on a flight that lands in Portland in approximately 15 minutes. I need you to draft a document removing Ethan Kellerman as my beneficiary and leaving everything to charity instead. Can you have something ready for me to sign as soon as I land? And please, do not tell anyone about this. I'll explain when I see you. Diane *. I hit send before I could second guess myself. The email swished away, and I prayed it would go through before we lost signal again. The plane banked sharply, beginning its final approach. The woman next to me stirred, pulling her headphones off and blinking sleepily. Are we landing? Yes, I managed. She yawned and stretched. Thank God. I hate flying. I almost laughed. Hate flying. If only that was the worst of my problems. The pilot's voice came over the intercom one last time. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. I looked toward the back of the plane. Linda was standing in the aisle, mechanically checking seatbelts, her face a mask of professional composure. But when our eyes met, I saw the apology there. The guilt. The fear. Derek was in the galley, securing equipment, but he kept glancing toward the front of the plane. Toward me. And suddenly I understood something. They were both scared. Not of me. Of Ethan. My son had inspired such fear in these two people, one his own mother, that they were willing to be accessories to murder rather than cross him. What had he become? How had I not seen it? The wheels touched down with a screech and a bounce. We hurtled down the runway, brakes engaged, speed decreasing rapidly. Rain lashed against the windows. Portland welcomed me home the way it always did, grey and wet and unforgiving. The plane taxied toward the gate. Around me, passengers were already unbuckling, reaching for overhead compartments, chattering about their plans. Normal people doing normal things, completely unaware that somewhere in this airport, a man was waiting to kill one of them. To kill me. My phone buzzed. I looked down. An email from Brenda. Diane, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm at the office now. I can have a new will drafted in an hour, but I need more details. Call me as soon as you land. 1 hour. That was too long. By then I'd already be dead, according to Linda's timeline. The plane lurched to a stop at the gate. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Immediately, everyone stood up, crowding the aisle in that peculiar airline ritual where everyone rushes to stand still for 10 minutes. I stayed seated. Thinking. I had 3 options, as I saw it. 1. I could refuse to get off the plane. Stay in my seat, make a scene, force them to call security. But security would eventually remove me, and then what? I'd look crazy. Unstable. And Ethan would just be waiting outside security instead of at baggage claim. 2. I could get off the plane and try to slip away. Find a security officer, explain the situation. But what could I prove? I had a crumpled napkin with a frantic warning and the word of a flight attendant who'd already admitted her son had paid her off. Any lawyer would shred that in seconds. 3. I could face this head-on. Get off the plane. Go to baggage claim. See who was waiting for me. And somehow turn the tables. The third option was insane. Possibly suicidal. But it was also the only one that might give me real answers. The aisle was clearing now. Passengers filing off with their carry-ons and their relief at being on solid ground again. The woman next to me squeezed past, mumbling apologies. I stood. Pulled my bag from under the seat. My hands were steady now. The fear had crystallized into something else. Something harder. Anger. Maybe. Or determination. If my son wanted to kill me, he was going to have to look me in the eye and do it himself. I moved toward the exit. Linda was standing near the door, bidding passengers goodbye with mechanical pleasantry. When I reached her, she grabbed my arm. Please, she whispered. Please don't do this. There's a back exit. Near gate C7. I can show you. No. I pulled my arm free. I'm going to baggage claim. He'll kill you. Maybe. I looked at her directly, but he's going to have to work for it. I stepped off the plane. The jetway was cold and smelled like recycled air and diesel. My shoes made soft squeaking sounds on the textured floor. Ahead of me, the other passengers from my flight were dispersing, some heading for connecting flights, others toward baggage claim. I followed the signs. Down the escalator. through the lower level where the rental car companies and ground transportation desks were, toward Carousel 3, where the screen said my flight's luggage would appear. The baggage claim area was crowded. Families reuniting. Businessmen on phones. A driver holding a sign for someone named Henderson. And standing near the far end of Carousel 3, hands in his pockets, face carefully neutral. Ethan. My son. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. Our eyes locked across the crowded space, and for just a second, I saw surprise flash across his face. He hadn't expected me to come. Linda must have warned him, I realized. Must have sent some kind of message. But here I was anyway. He smiled. Started walking toward me. And despite everything, despite Linda's warnings, despite knowing what I knew, part of me still wanted to run to him. Still wanted to believe this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Mom. His voice was warm, delighted. He opened his arms for a hug. I didn't move. Just stared at him. His arms dropped. The smile faltered. Mom? Are you okay? You look. Where is he? My voice was flat. Where's who? The man you hired. The one who's supposed to kill me. The color drained from Ethan's face. For a moment, just a moment, I saw real emotion there. Something that might have been panic or might have been guilt. Then the mask came back. I don't know what you're talking about. Did something happen on the flight? Are you feeling okay? Your mother was on my flight. I watched him carefully. Linda Parrish. She told me everything. He went very still. She's not well. She's got mental health issues. Substance abuse problems. Whatever she told you. She told me you're going to kill me for the insurance money. People were starting to stare. A woman with 2 small children glanced over nervously and moved further away. Ethan's jaw tightened. We should talk about this somewhere private. No. We should talk about this right here, right now, where there are witnesses. My voice was rising. Did you hire someone to kill me or not? Mom, please. Answer me. The baggage claim went quiet. Everyone was looking now. Security officers at the far end had noticed the commotion and were starting to walk over. Ethan's face transformed. The warmth, the concern, all of it vanished. What was left was cold and calculating, a stranger wearing my son's face. You should have changed your will when you had the chance, he said quietly. This would have been so much easier. And then I saw him. The man Linda had mentioned. He was walking toward us from the direction of the restrooms, one hand inside his jacket, moving with purpose. Coming for me. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about fear. Real fear, not the kind you get from horror movies or roller coasters. Real fear is clarifying. It strips away everything that doesn't matter and shows you exactly who you are when there's no more time for pretending. And in that moment, watching that man walk toward me with his hand inside his jacket and murder in his eyes, I discovered something about myself. I wasn't ready to die. Not for Ethan. Not for anyone. The security officers were still 20 feet away, moving through the crowd but not fast enough. The man was closer. 10 feet. 8. He was ordinary looking, forgettable, mid-40s, brown hair, jeans and a windbreaker. The kind of person you'd pass on the street and never remember. But his eyes were locked on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. If you're watching this, hit that like button right now. Because what I'm about to tell you, you won't believe it. And make sure you check the description box for more stories like this. Real stories, true stories, the kind that'll haunt you. I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed. Not a polite, restrained scream. A full-throated, primal shriek that echoed through the baggage claim area and made everyone within 50 feet freeze. That man has a gun. He's going to kill me. The effect was instantaneous. People scattered. Parents grabbed children. Someone else started screaming. And the security officers, bless them, broke into a run. The man in the windbreaker stopped, his hand still inside his jacket. For a split second, I saw him calculate his options. He could pull out whatever weapon he had, and I was certain now it was a weapon, and finish what he'd been paid to do. Or he could run. He ran. Bolted toward the exit, shoving people out of his way. The security officers changed direction, pursuing him. One was shouting into his radio, calling for backup. The baggage claim erupted into chaos, alarms blaring, people panicking, children crying. And Ethan. Ethan was running too. Not after the man. Away from me. Toward a different exit, his face pale and desperate. Stop him. I pointed at Ethan. That's my son. He hired that man. He's trying to kill me for my life insurance. A few people looked at me like I was insane. But one security officer, a young black woman with her hair in a tight bun, caught Ethan by the arm before he could reach the doors. Sir, I need you to stop right there. Get off me. Ethan tried to pull away, but she had a surprisingly strong grip. I haven't done anything. My mother is having a mental health crisis, she's delusional, she needs help. Then you can explain that to the police. Her voice was calm but firm. But right now, you're going to stand still and keep your hands where I can see them. More security arrived. Airport police. Within minutes, the entire baggage claim area was locked down. No one in, no one out. They'd caught the man in the windbreaker trying to exit through the automatic doors. He'd been tackled by 3 officers and was now face down on the ground, hands cuffed behind his back. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. An older officer, grey-haired and kind-faced, guided me to a bench near the carousel. I need you to stay calm and tell me exactly what happened. So I did. All of it. Linda Parrish. The napkin. Derek. Ethan's plan. The words tumbled out in a rush, and even to my own ears, they sounded insane. The officer listened, his expression neutral, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he said, "Do you have any proof of these allegations?" The napkin. I have the napkin Linda gave me. I dug through my purse with trembling hands and pulled it out, now wrinkled and damp with sweat. And Linda, she's still on the plane, I think. Or maybe in the airport. She's a flight attendant for Southwest. Flight 447 from Phoenix. She can corroborate everything. The officer took the napkin, examined it, then called someone on his radio. We need to locate a Southwest flight attendant, Linda Parrish, who was working Flight 447. And I need someone to check the manifest for another crew member named Derek, no last name yet. She said she's his biological mother, I added. Ethan's. That he tracked her down 6 months ago. The officer's eyebrows rose slightly, but he just nodded and made another note. Across the baggage claim, I could see Ethan. He was talking animatedly to the female security officer, gesturing with his hands, the picture of innocent confusion. She wasn't buying it, though. She kept glancing over at me, then back at him, her expression skeptical. The man in the windbreaker was being hauled to his feet. His jacket had fallen open, and I saw it then, a gun. Not in his hand anymore, but visible in a shoulder holster. The officers had already confiscated it. My stomach lurched. I'd been right. He'd been seconds away from. I couldn't finish the thought. Do you need medical attention? The officer's voice was gentle. You're very pale. No, I just need, what did I need? To go home? Home where Ethan knew I'd be, where he could try again. I need somewhere safe. We're going to take you to a private room and get a full statement. And we'll need to bring your son in for questioning. He'll deny everything. He's a good liar. Let us worry about that. He stood, offering me his hand. Can you walk? I could. Barely. My legs felt like jelly, but I managed to stand and follow him through the crowd, which had thinned considerably now that people realized there wasn't going to be any more excitement, toward a security office near the main terminal. As we passed Ethan, he called out, Mom, please. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong. Let me explain. I stopped. Looked at him. Really looked at him. Trying to find some trace of the little boy who'd called me Miss Diane and drawn me pictures and promised we'd be okay after Thomas died. He wasn't there. Maybe he'd never been there. Maybe I'd just been seeing what I wanted to see all along. When did you decide to kill me? My voice was steady now. Cold. Was it right after Thomas died? Or did it take a few years? His face hardened. You're going to regret this. I already do. I regret every choice I made that brought us to this moment. The officer pulled me gently away. Come on, let's get you somewhere quiet. The security office was small and sterile, beige walls, fluorescent lighting, a metal desk with a computer, and 2 uncomfortable plastic chairs. They brought me water, asked if I wanted coffee, told me a detective from Portland Police would be arriving shortly. I sat there, numb, as the adrenaline slowly drained away and left me hollow. They'd found Linda. She'd still been in the terminal, apparently, trying to decide what to do. When they'd approached her, she'd broken down immediately and confirmed everything I'd said. Derek too, he'd been more resistant, but when faced with the alternative of being charged as an accomplice to attempted murder, he'd started talking. The man in the windbreaker was named Craig Holloway. He had a record: assault, armed robbery, illegal weapons possession. He'd been out on parole for 8 months. And according to the initial questioning, he'd been hired through an intermediary to take care of a problem at the airport. He claimed he didn't know who'd hired him or why. Just that the money had been good. $25,000. That's what my life was worth to my son. $25,000 to a career criminal to shoot me in a crowded airport and disappear into the chaos. The door opened and a woman walked in. She was in her early 50s, I guessed, with short dark hair and sharp eyes. She wore slacks and a blazer and had a detective's badge clipped to her belt. "Mrs. Kellerman? I'm Detective Rachel Winters, Portland PD. I need to ask you some questions about today's incident." I told the story again. And again. And again as different people came and went, detectives, federal agents, because it had happened in an airport, someone explained, which made it a federal matter, a victim's advocate who gave me pamphlets about trauma and support services. Hours passed. They brought me a sandwich I couldn't eat. More water. A blanket because I couldn't stop shivering. Finally, Detective Winters came back, this time with a laptop. She set it on the desk between us. "Mrs. Kellerman, we've been looking into your son's background. And we've found some things I think you need to see." She turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a photograph of a young woman. Blonde. Pretty. Smiling in that casual way people do in social media photos. This is Tessa Wolfe. She was Ethan's girlfriend until 3 months ago. She was reported missing by her employer when she didn't show up for work and they couldn't reach her. The case went cold pretty quickly because she told a few people she was thinking about moving to California. My throat was tight. Linda mentioned her. Said she'd disappeared. We've been able to trace some electronic communications between Ethan and Tessa in the weeks before she vanished. He was running an investment fraud, a Ponzi scheme, basically, and she'd figured it out. Threatened to go to the authorities. The last text exchange between them was concerning. She clicked to another screen. Text messages. Tessa I'm serious, If you don't return those people's money, I'm calling the police. Ethan you don't want to do that. Tessa yes I do. What you're doing is illegal and wrong. Ethan think about what you're saying. Think about the consequences. Tessa the only one who needs to worry about consequences is you. Ethan wrong answer. That was the last message. Sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in June. Tessa Wolfe was never seen again. We've executed a search warrant for Ethan's residence and vehicles, Detective Winters continued. We're looking for any evidence that might tell us what happened to Ms. Wolfe. But I wanted you to know because this case has become significantly more serious than attempted murder. You think he killed her? It wasn't a question. I think it's a strong possibility. I stared at the picture of Tessa Wolfe. She looked so young. So full of life. And Ethan had. I ran for the trash can in the corner and vomited. Nothing came up but bile and water, but my body kept heaving, trying to purge something that couldn't be purged. Detective Winters waited until I was finished, then handed me some paper towels and more water. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I know this is a lot to process. What happens now?" My voice was hoarse. "Ethan is being held for questioning. We have enough to charge him with conspiracy to commit murder based on Linda Parrish's and Derek Williams' statements. Craig Holloway has already been charged with attempted murder and weapons violations. As for Tessa Wolfe, that investigation is ongoing. Can I go home?" "Yes, but we'd prefer if you stayed somewhere else for a few days. Just as a precaution. Do you have family in the area? Friends?" I thought of Patricia in Arizona. My few remaining friends from teaching, most of whom had moved away or drifted apart after Thomas died. My house in Portland, filled with memories and silence. "I'll find somewhere," I said. Detective Winters handed me her card. "Call me if you think of anything else. Or if you just need to talk." This kind of betrayal. It's not something anyone should have to face alone. I took the card. Nodded. But I wasn't really listening anymore. My mind was spinning, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. My son had tried to kill me. My son had possibly killed his girlfriend. My son was a monster, and I'd spent years making excuses for him, enabling him, loving him even when all the signs said I shouldn't. What did that make me? They released me from the airport around 8 p.m. 9 hours after I'd landed. 9 hours that had fundamentally altered everything I thought I knew about my life, my son, and myself. Detective Winters arranged for a patrol officer to drive me home, just to make sure you get there safely, she'd said, though we both knew it was also to make sure I didn't do anything stupid like try to contact Ethan or interfere with the investigation. The officer was young, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a nervous habit of tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He tried to make small talk during the drive, asked about the weather, whether I'd lived in Portland long, if I needed him to stop anywhere. But I couldn't manage more than monosyllabic responses. My house was dark when we pulled up. I'd forgotten to leave any lights on, and now it looked unwelcoming, almost sinister in the rain. The officer walked me to the door, waited while I fumbled with my keys, then did a quick walkthrough to make sure no one was inside. "Looks clear," he said. "But I'd recommend you change your locks as soon as possible. And maybe stay with a friend tonight." I promised I would, though I had no intention of following through on either suggestion. I was too tired. Too overwhelmed. I just wanted to collapse into my own bed and pretend, for a few hours at least, that this wasn't happening. The officer left. I locked the door behind him, threw the deadbolt, and stood in the entryway of my house, this house where I'd lived for 23 years, where Thomas and I had built a life, where Ethan had grown from a quiet 7-year-old into the monster who'd just tried to have me killed, and felt absolutely nothing. The numbness was almost a relief. I should call Patricia. I should call Brenda. I should do 100 different things. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle that had been open for probably 3 weeks, and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. My phone kept buzzing. Text messages. Voicemails. I ignored them all except one. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This isn't over. My hand shook as I stared at those 3 words. Was it Ethan? Did they let him send texts from custody? Or was it someone else, someone he'd contacted before they arrested him, giving them instructions in case the plan went wrong? I should call Detective Winters. Show her the text. I did neither. Just deleted it and turned my phone off. The house was too quiet. I could hear every creak, every settling sound, every gust of wind against the windows. Sounds I'd lived with for decades suddenly seemed ominous, threatening. I couldn't stay here. The officer had been right about that much. I went upstairs to pack a bag, moving through the motions mechanically. Clothes. Toiletries. My laptop. Thomas's windbreaker, even though it was ridiculous to bring it, even though it wouldn't protect me from anything that actually mattered. In my bedroom, I paused. There was a photo on my nightstand, Ethan's high school graduation. He was wearing his cap and gown, diploma in hand, grinning at the camera. Thomas had his arm around him. I was on Ethan's other side, beaming with pride. We looked like a family. We looked happy. I picked up the frame and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, glass spraying across the hardwood floor. The sound broke something in me. I sank to my knees and finally, let myself cry. Not quiet tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that tore through my chest and left me aching. I cried for the son I'd thought I had. I cried for Thomas, who'd never know what Ethan had become. I cried for Tessa Wolfe, who'd paid the ultimate price for getting involved with a sociopath. And I cried for myself. For the naive woman who'd believed love could fix anything, could overcome any darkness. I don't know how long I stayed there on the floor. Long enough that my knees ached and my throat was raw. Long enough that the crying finally stopped and left me empty again. I gathered the broken glass carefully, wrapped it in newspaper, and threw it away. Then I finished packing my bag and walked out of that house without looking back. I ended up at a budget motel near the airport. The kind of place where you pay cash and nobody asks questions. The room smelled like stale cigarette smoke and the carpet had suspicious stains, but it had a lock and a bed and that was all I needed. I couldn't sleep, though. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. The way he'd looked at me in the baggage claim, cold and calculating. Asterisk, you should have changed your will when you had the chance. Asterisk. At 2 a.m., I gave up and turned on the TV. Local news. The airport incident had made the headlines. What witnesses describe as a harrowing scene at Portland International Airport this afternoon. A woman identified as Diane Kellerman, age 63, allegedly accused her own son of hiring a hitman to kill her. Police have confirmed that a suspect was apprehended at the scene with an illegal firearm, and multiple individuals are in custody pending charges. Sources close to the investigation suggest this may be connected to a life insurance fraud scheme, though details remain scarce. We'll bring you more information as this developing story. I turned it off. Seeing it on the news made it real in a way it hadn't been before. This wasn't just something that had happened to me privately. It was public. People I'd never met knew my name, knew my son had tried to kill me. How did you come back from something like that? My phone, which I turned back on out of some compulsion I couldn't explain, buzzed with a new voicemail. I checked it. Brenda Morrison's voice, tight with concern. Diane, I just saw the news. Please call me as soon as you get this. I've drafted the new will like you asked, but we need to discuss. There are things you need to know about Ethan's financial situation that might be relevant to the investigation. Call me, please. Things about Ethan's financial situation. Of course. There was always more, wasn't there? More secrets, more lies, more evidence of the person he really was. I called her back, not caring that it was the middle of the night. She answered on the second ring. Diane. Thank God. Where are you? A motel. I'm safe. Relatively speaking. You said there were things I needed to know. Yes. I heard rustling, like she was looking through papers. I've been doing some digging since you sent that email. Ethan's been forging your signature, Diane. For the past 8 months, he's been taking out loans using your house as collateral. The room tilted. What? He's mortgaged the house, your house, 3 times. Different lenders, all of them predatory operations that don't do thorough verification. The total is close to $400,000. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. There's more, Brenda continued, her voice grim. He's opened credit cards in your name. Maxed them out. And there are several personal loans from payday lending companies. Diane, you're approximately $600,000 in debt, and most of it was accumulated in the last year. That's not possible. I would have known. I would have gotten statements, notices. He changed your mailing address on all the accounts. Had everything sent to a P.O. box he controls. The only reason I found out was because one of the mortgage companies filed a lien against your property, and it showed up when I did a title search as part of the will revision process. $600,000. My house, the house Thomas and I had saved for years to buy, the house we'd paid off early by living frugally and making sacrifices, was now buried under debt I'd never agreed to. Can we fight it? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Prove I didn't sign those documents. Absolutely. But it's going to take time and money. You'll need a forensic accountant, a fraud attorney, probably a civil attorney too if you want to sue Ethan for damages. And even then, the creditors are going to argue that as his mother, you should have been monitoring his activities, that you enabled. I didn't enable anything. The words burst out of me. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? A long pause. Then, softly, I know. I'm sorry. I'm not saying you did anything wrong. I'm saying that's what their lawyers will argue. I pressed my palm against my forehead, trying to push back the headache that was forming. So what do I do? First, you file a police report about the fraud. Detective Winters should be able to help with that. It'll strengthen the criminal case against Ethan. Second, you contact the credit bureaus and put a freeze on your accounts. Third, you let me handle the legal mess. I'll start filing disputes with the lenders, but I need you to understand this is going to be a long process. Months, possibly years. Years. Years of fighting to reclaim my own life, my own identity, while everyone watched and judged and whispered about the woman whose son tried to kill her. One more thing, Brenda said. The life insurance policy on you? The one Thomas took out. What about it? Ethan tried to increase the death benefit 6 weeks ago. He contacted the insurance company claiming you'd requested an increase to $500,000. They denied it because they required your signature and in-person verification, which he couldn't provide. But Diane, he tried. He was planning this for a while. $500,000. Plus whatever he could get from selling the house, if he could sell it with all those liens. Plus my retirement accounts, my savings, everything. He'd been systematically destroying my financial life while planning to end my actual life. And I hadn't noticed. Hadn't suspected a thing until Linda Parrish pressed that napkin into my hand. Are you still there? Brenda asked. Yes. I'm here. I need time to process this. Of course. But Diane? Don't wait too long. The sooner we start fighting this, the better chance we have of salvaging something. And... She hesitated. You should know the news is already picking up the story. Your name is out there. You might want to prepare for media attention. Media attention. Perfect. As if this wasn't humiliating enough. I thanked her and ended the call, then sat on the edge of that stained motel bed and tried to figure out how my life had become this nightmare. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and my phone ringing. Detective Winters. Mrs. Kellerman, I apologize for calling so early, but we need you to come down to the station. There have been some developments. My stomach dropped. What kind of developments? It's better if we discuss this in person. Can you be here in an hour? I agreed, hung up, and forced myself into the shower. The water pressure was terrible and the temperature fluctuated wildly between scalding and freezing, but I stood under it anyway, trying to wash away the feeling of violation that clung to my skin. Ethan had touched everything. My finances, my home, my life. He'd been inside my world, manipulating it, destroying it, all while I smiled and made excuses and told myself he just needed more time, more support, more understanding. By the time I got to the police station, I felt hollowed out. A receptionist directed me to Detective Winters's office, where I found her sitting with another detective, a middle-aged white man with a graying beard and tired eyes. Mrs. Kellerman, this is Detective Mike Foster. He's been working the Tessa Wolfe case. We shook hands. His grip was firm but not aggressive. Please, sit, Winters said, gesturing to a chair. We wanted to update you on where things stand with the investigation. I sat, bracing myself. Foster spoke first. We executed the search warrant on your son's apartment yesterday evening. We found quite a bit. He opened a folder and pulled out several photographs. Crime scene photos. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. The first image showed a storage unit. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, all labeled with names I didn't recognize. Foster pointed to them. These are documents related to the investment fraud. We're still going through them, but preliminary analysis suggests Ethan defrauded at least 40 people out of approximately $2 million. $2 million. The next photo showed a laptop. This is Ethan's personal computer. Our digital forensics team has been analyzing it. We found extensive searches about life insurance policies, how to hire contract killers, and ways to make a murder look accidental. We also found the communications with Craig Holloway, the man who was supposed to kill you. Ethan used an encrypted messaging app, but he wasn't as careful as he thought. Foster pulled out another image. This one made me recoil. It was a handwritten list. My daily routine. Where I shopped. What time I usually came home. Which neighbors I talked to. How often I went to the gym. Everything documented in Ethan's neat, precise handwriting. He'd been surveilling you for months, Foster said quietly. Planning this very carefully. But the airport plan was more spontaneous, Winters added. We think Linda's involvement gave him an opportunity he couldn't pass up. Having a flight attendant who could monitor you, confirm you were on the plane, alert him when you landed, it solved a lot of logistical problems. I stared at that list. At my life reduced to a series of predictable patterns that my son had studied like a predator watching prey. There's something else, Foster said. He pulled out one more photograph. This one showed a shallow grave in what looked like a wooded area. And in that grave. I turned away, bile rising in my throat. We found Tessa Wolfe's body yesterday afternoon, Foster said. Buried in Forest Park, about 2 miles from a trailhead. We were able to locate it based on GPS data from Ethan's phone. He'd disabled the location services, but there's still metadata embedded in photos he took, including one that inadvertently captured. He stopped. I'm sorry. I know this is difficult. How did she die? My voice was barely a whisper. Blunt force trauma to the head. Quick, at least. She wouldn't have suffered long. Wouldn't have suffered long. As if that made it better. As if anything could make better the fact that a 28-year-old woman was dead because she tried to do the right thing. Ethan's been formally charged with her murder, Winters said. Along with attempted murder in your case, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, forgery, and about a dozen other charges. He's being held without bail. His arraignment is tomorrow morning. Will I have to testify? Eventually, yes. But not at the arraignment. That's just a formality where he enters his plea. He'll plead not guilty, I said flatly. Probably. Most defendants do at arraignment. But Mrs. Kellerman, the evidence against him is overwhelming. The DA is confident this will result in a conviction. I should have felt relieved. Vindicated. Something. Instead, I just felt tired. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Winters said, and her tone made me look up. Linda Parrish. What about her? She's cooperating fully with the investigation. She's given us detailed statements about everything Ethan told her, including his plans for you. In exchange, the DA has agreed to reduce her charges. She'll likely plead guilty to conspiracy and get probation plus community service. That's all. Anger flared in my chest. She helped him. She knew what he was planning. She also saved your life, Winters interrupted gently. If she hadn't warned you, if you hadn't made that scene in baggage claim, Craig Holloway would have shot you in the parking garage. We found his car. He had zip ties, duct tape, and a top in the trunk. He was going to make it look like a carjacking gone wrong. The anger deflated. She was right. Linda had saved me. Even though it meant betraying her son, even though she'd been terrified of the consequences, she'd done the right thing in the end. She wants to speak with you, Foster added. If you're willing. She's asked multiple times if she could apologize in person. I don't know if I'm ready for that. That's completely understandable. Just know the option is there if you change your mind. They gave me more information, court dates, resources for victims of violent crime, contact information for the DA's office, and then let me go. I walked out of that police station into a grey Portland morning and stood on the sidewalk, unsure where to go or what to do next. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Asterisk just saw the news. I'm flying up tomorrow. You're not going through this alone. Asterisk. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, asterisk thank you. Asterisk. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to express the gratitude I felt. But it was all I had. The next few days were a blur of lawyers, meetings, and reporters camped outside the motel. I'd had to change locations twice to avoid them, finally settling in a hotel downtown that had security and some semblance of privacy. Patricia arrived as promised, descended on my situation like a force of nature, and immediately started organizing everything I'd been too overwhelmed to handle. She met with Brenda, filed paperwork, dealt with the creditors, made lists and schedules and plans. You're going to get through this, she told me on the third night, as we sat in my hotel room eating takeout Thai food. You're stronger than you think. I wanted to believe her. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that list. My routine, documented in Ethan's handwriting. Evidence of how thoroughly he'd planned my death. The arraignment happened without me. Patricia insisted I watch from home, or rather, the hotel, on the live stream the court provided. I saw Ethan walk into that courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed, looking smaller somehow. Diminished. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty on all charges. The judge denied bail, citing flight risk and danger to the community. The whole thing took less than 15 minutes. Afterward, the news showed footage of me, old photos they'd dug up from somewhere, one from my teaching days, another from Thomas's funeral. They talked about me like I was a character in a story, not a real person. The mother who survived her son's murder plot. A family torn apart by greed. They didn't know anything. Didn't understand the complexity, the years of manipulation and gaslighting, the way Ethan had systematically isolated me from friends and family until I'd had no one to talk to, no one to notice what was happening. But I was done being a victim. Done letting Ethan control the narrative. I called a reporter, one who'd seemed less sensationalist than the others, and agreed to an interview. Patricia thought I was crazy, but I needed to tell my story. Needed people to understand that I wasn't some naive fool who'd been willfully blind to her son's true nature. I was a mother who'd loved her child and been betrayed in the worst possible way. The interview aired 2 days later. I watched it with Patricia, cringing at how hollow I looked on screen, how my voice shook when I talked about finding out Ethan wasn't even my biological son, that everything Thomas had told me was a lie. But I also watched the social media response. And for every cruel comment, and there were plenty, there were 10 more from people sharing their own stories of family betrayal. Of children who'd stolen from parents, abused them, worse. I wasn't alone. That realization didn't fix anything, but it helped. Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. 3 weeks after the arrest, I finally agreed to meet Linda Parrish. We met at a coffee shop in a quiet neighborhood, far from downtown and the media circus that still occasionally cropped up whenever there was a new development in the case. Patricia insisted on coming with me, sitting at a nearby table just in case, though neither of us could articulate what we thought might happen. Linda looked terrible. She'd aged a decade in 3 weeks, her face gaunt and pale, dark circles under her eyes. She was wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a faded sweatshirt, and kept her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like she was trying to draw warmth from it even though the shop was stuffy and overheated. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down across from her. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. Maybe she had. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know what I did was." "You saved my life," I interrupted. It was the truth, even if I still didn't know how I felt about her. "If you hadn't warned me. If I'd been a better mother, you wouldn't have needed warning." Her eyes filled with tears. "If I'd kept him, if I'd stayed sober, if I'd..." "Don't." I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. I've spent 3 weeks playing the if-only game. If only I'd seen the signs earlier. If only I'd been stricter, or more understanding, or gotten him better therapy, or 1,000 other things. It doesn't change anything. Ethan made his choices. We don't get to take responsibility for those. Linda wiped her eyes with a napkin. "The detective told me about Tessa. That they found her body. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know he'd killed her. He told me she'd left town, and I wanted to believe him because the alternative was admitting your son is a murderer." I understood that impulse all too well. She nodded miserably. "I need to tell you something. About Ethan's biological father." I tensed. "Thomas?" "No." She took a shaky breath. "Thomas wasn't his biological father either. Thomas adopted Ethan when he was 5, after..." She stopped, struggling with the words. "The truth is complicated. And ugly. And I've kept it secret for so long because I was ashamed, but you deserve to know." I waited. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with normal life. People working on laptops, students studying, a mother with a toddler wiping crumbs off a high chair. All of it felt surreal. "Ethan's father was named David Lancaster," Linda finally said. "I met him when I was 19. I wasn't in a good place. Drug use, mostly meth and pills. I'd dropped out of community college. My family had basically disowned me. And David, he was older, had money, seemed stable. I thought he could save me." She laughed bitterly. "He was anything but stable. He was a con artist. Ran scams on elderly people, convincing them to invest in fake companies. He was good at it too. Charming, trustworthy, the kind of person you'd never suspect. We lived off his cons for about 3 years. I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I was high most of the time and he kept me supplied, so I didn't care." "What happened to him?" "He got caught. Someone figured out his game and went to the police. David was arrested, charged with multiple counts of fraud and theft. He went to prison for 12 years. She paused. "Ethan was 2 at the time. And I was 5 months pregnant with his second child." I stared at her. "Ethan has a sibling." "Had. I miscarried at 7 months. The drugs, the stress, my body just couldn't handle it." Her voice cracked. "After that, I spiraled. Got worse instead of better. Child Services took Ethan away when he was 3. Put him in foster care. I tried to clean up, tried to get him back, but I kept relapsing. Eventually, they terminated my parental rights. And Thomas adopted him. Yes. Through the foster system. I didn't know who Thomas was back then, didn't know anything about where Ethan ended up. I was told it was a closed adoption, that I'd never have contact. And honestly, at the time, I thought that was for the best. I was a mess. I would have destroyed him. But you got sober. Eventually. It took years. Multiple rehabs, relapses, rock bottoms. But I finally got clean about 20 years ago. Got my life together. Got the flight attendant job. And I never stopped thinking about Ethan. Never stopped wondering if he was okay, if his adoptive family loved him, if he was happy. She wiped her eyes again. Then 6 months ago, he found me. Through one of those DNA testing websites. He'd submitted his DNA, I'd submitted mine. Just curiosity. You know, wondering if I had any family out there, and we matched. Parent-child relationship. 99.9% certainty. You must have been thrilled. I was. God, I was so happy. I thought I was getting a second chance. He seemed wonderful at first, smart, charming, successful. He told me about his life, about you and Thomas, about his career. We started having regular phone calls, then meetings. He'd fly down to Arizona to see me, or I'd arrange my flights to have layovers in Portland so we could have coffee. When did you realize something was wrong? Gradually. Little things at first. He'd ask probing questions about my finances. Whether I had savings, whether I owned property. Then he started asking for money, small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there. He always had a reason, always paid me back. Then the amounts got bigger. And when I started pushing back, he got cold. Threatening. Said I owed him because I'd abandoned him, because I'd been a terrible mother. I knew that tone. The guilt-tripping. The manipulation. He told me about his plan with you about a month ago, Linda continued. Framed it like you were this abusive, controlling parent who'd stolen his inheritance. He said he just needed to scare you into changing your will, giving him access to the money Thomas left. He swore it wouldn't go further than that. And I wanted to believe him. So I agreed to help. To be his eyes on that flight. What changed? Why did you warn me? The morning of the flight, he called me. Told me the plan had changed. That he'd decided it would be simpler to just, she couldn't finish. I tried to call it off. Told him I wouldn't be part of it. He said it was too late, everything was already in motion, and if I tried to stop it, he'd make sure I went down too. He had recordings of our conversations, texts where I'd agreed to help. He said he'd frame me as the mastermind and disappear with the money. So you warned me anyway. I had to. I couldn't. She broke down, sobbing. I couldn't let him kill you. I already failed him once as a mother. I couldn't fail another person because of him. I sat there, watching this woman cry over her son, this woman who was both Ethan's first victim and his accomplice. I should have hated her. Part of me did. But part of me understood her too, understood how love could make you blind, could make you complicit in terrible things because the alternative, admitting the person you love is beyond redemption, is too painful. What about his father? I asked when her crying had subsided. David Lancaster. Is he still alive? She nodded. He got out of prison about 8 years ago. Last I heard, he was living in Nevada somewhere. Why? Because I need to understand where this came from. Whether it's genetic, environmental, both. I leaned forward. Did David show signs of what Ethan is? You mean sociopathy? Linda said the word I'd been avoiding. Yes. Absolutely. He had no empathy, no remorse. Everything was a calculation, a game. People were just marks to be exploited. She met my eyes. But Ethan had you and Thomas. He had stability, love, opportunity. He should have turned out different. Maybe he couldn't have. Maybe it was always there, waiting. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Linda said, I'm testifying against him. At the trial. The DA wants me to explain how he manipulated me, how he planned everything. My attorney thinks it'll help my case, show I was coerced. But honestly, I'd do it anyway. He needs to be stopped. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For being strong enough to do the right thing when it mattered. I stood up. I can't forgive you. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I understand why you did what you did. Both the bad and the good. Linda stood too. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry I gave birth to him. Sorry I couldn't raise him better. Sorry you had to. Stop apologizing for him, I interrupted. He's not a child. He's a grown man who made monstrous choices. You don't get to carry that guilt. Neither do I. Not anymore. I walked away, back to Patricia, who was watching with concern etched on her face. How do you feel? She asked as we left the coffee shop. Lighter, I said. And I meant it. Talking to Linda, hearing her story, understanding the full scope of Ethan's pathology, it helped. It didn't fix anything, but it helped. That night, alone in my hotel room, I finally opened the box Patricia had brought from my house. The one containing family photos, albums from Ethan's childhood. I went through them slowly, methodically, looking for signs I'd missed. Trying to pinpoint when the sweet, quiet boy became the monster. But there was no single moment. No obvious transition. Just a gradual accumulation of small cruelties, small lies, small betrayals that I'd rationalized and excused until they became normal. In one photo, Ethan was maybe 10, holding a trophy from his science fair win. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. Had I noticed that at the time? Or was I seeing it now only because I knew what he'd become? In another, he was 16, standing between Thomas and me at his high school graduation. Thomas looked proud. I looked happy. Ethan looked calculating. Like he was already planning how to use us. I closed the album and put it back in the box. I didn't need these photos. Didn't need to preserve memories of a person who'd never really existed. Tomorrow, I'd call Brenda and finalize the new will. I'd leave everything to charity, scholarships for underprivileged kids, domestic violence shelters, organizations that helped families of violent crime victims. Ethan would get nothing. Not one penny. It was the least I could do. The very least. The trial began on a cold January morning, 5 months after my flight from Phoenix. 5 months of legal wrangling, media attention, and slow, painful healing. I'd moved out of the hotel after 6 weeks and into a small rental apartment Patricia helped me find. The house, my house with Thomas, the one with all the memories, was still tied up in legal proceedings as Brenda worked to untangle the fraudulent mortgages. I didn't care. I never wanted to set foot in that house again anyway. The apartment was small but mine. I'd furnished it with second-hand furniture and prints from a local art fair. Nothing from my old life. This was a fresh start, or as close to one as I could manage. Patricia had stayed for a month before her own life called her back to Arizona, but she called every day and flew up for the trial. The courthouse was packed. This had become one of those cases, sensational enough to draw national attention. Son accused of plotting mother's murder, the headlines screamed. Con artist kills girlfriend, targets mom for insurance money. Every detail of our lives had been picked apart, analyzed, discussed by strangers who thought they understood what had happened. They didn't. Nobody could, unless they'd lived it. I sat in the front row, Patricia beside me. Across the aisle sat Tessa Wolf's family, her parents, her younger brother. We'd met briefly before the trial started. Her mother had hugged me, both of us crying, united in our grief and rage at the man who'd destroyed so much. Ethan was led in wearing a suit his public defender must have provided. He'd lost weight in jail, his face thinner, his eyes harder. When he scanned the courtroom and his gaze landed on me, I forced myself not to look away. Let him see that I wasn't afraid anymore. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I won't bore you with every detail. The legal maneuvering, the endless testimony, the technical evidence about phone records and financial documents. But there were moments that stand out, burned into my memory like scars. Linda's testimony was devastating. She walked the jury through every conversation she'd had with Ethan, every manipulation, every lie. She explained how he'd played on her guilt, her desperate need for connection with the son she'd lost. When the defense attorney tried to paint her as an unreliable witness, pointing out her history of drug use, suggesting she was mentally unstable, she held firm. I may have been an addict, she said quietly. I may have made terrible choices. But I know what my son is capable of, and I'm not going to let him hurt anyone else. Derek Williams testified next. He was less sympathetic than Linda, clearly motivated by his own plea deal, but his testimony was damning. He described Ethan's cold calculation, the way he discussed killing me like it was a business problem to solve. He said mothers were a liability once you didn't need them anymore, Derek told the jury. Said they got in the way, tried to control you. He said he'd learned from watching other people make mistakes. They let emotion cloud their judgment. He wasn't going to make that mistake. Craig Holloway, the hitman, testified in exchange for a reduced sentence. He described the payment arrangement, the instructions he'd received, the plan to make it look like a robbery. When asked if he'd understood he was being hired to commit murder, he'd shrugged and said, "Yeah, that's what I do." The casualness of it was horrifying. But the worst, the absolute worst, was when they showed the jury Ethan's search history, projected on screens around the courtroom. Asterisk how long does it take to suffocate someone asterisk. Asterisk untraceable poisons asterisk. Asterisk life insurance payout timeline after death asterisk. Asterisk how to make a murder look like an accident asterisk. Asterisk Forest Park Portland body disposal asterisk. That last one, timestamped 3 days before Tessa Wolfe disappeared. The prosecutor showed photos of Tessa's grave. Explained how forensics had matched dirt from Ethan's car to the burial site. How his phone's GPS, despite being disabled, had left enough of a trail to place him in that exact location the night Tessa vanished. Tessa's mother sobbed. Her father looked like he wanted to leap over the barrier and strangle Ethan with his bare hands. I understood the feeling. Through it all, Ethan showed no emotion. No remorse. No shame. Just a cold, clinical interest in the proceedings, like he was watching a documentary about someone else's crimes. When it was my turn to testify, I was terrified. Not of Ethan, not anymore, but of not doing justice to the truth. Of not making people understand. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Reeves, led me through my testimony gently. I described our relationship. The warning signs I'd missed or rationalized. The phone call 2 days before the flight, how warm and loving Ethan had sounded. The moments on the plane when Linda had warned me. Why didn't you listen to her at first? Angela asked. Because I didn't want to believe my son would do that to me, I said. My voice stayed steady. I'd spent 23 years convincing myself that love was enough. That if I just kept believing in him, supporting him, giving him chances, he'd eventually become the person I hoped he could be. Admitting I was wrong, admitting he was dangerous, meant admitting I'd wasted over 2 decades of my life. And now? What do you believe now? I looked directly at the jury. I believe my son is a sociopath. I believe he's incapable of genuine love or empathy. I believe he saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle between him and money he felt entitled to. And I believe if he ever gets out of prison, he'll hurt someone else. Because that's what he does. That's who he is. The defense attorney tried to shake me on cross-examination. Suggested I was a bitter, controlling mother who drove Ethan to desperation. Implied I'd exaggerated my financial problems to gain sympathy. I let him talk. Then I said, my son planned to murder me for insurance money. He killed his girlfriend and buried her in the woods. Those are facts, not interpretations. You can try to blame me if it makes you feel better, but it won't change what he did. The defense rested after 2 days of testimony from character witnesses, mostly people who barely knew Ethan, who could only speak to surface-level interactions, and a psychiatrist who tried to argue that Ethan suffered from attachment disorder due to his early childhood trauma and wasn't fully responsible for his actions. The prosecution's rebuttal psychiatrist tore that argument apart, explaining that while Ethan might have attachment issues, he was perfectly aware of right and wrong and had chosen to do wrong repeatedly, methodically, without remorse. Closing arguments were almost anticlimactic after weeks of testimony. Angela Reeves was brilliant, tying together every thread of evidence into a damning portrait of a calculated killer. The defense attorney did his best, but there was no real defense to offer. Just appeals to sympathy that rang hollow. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When they came back, I held Patricia's hand so tightly I probably left bruises. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Tessa Wolfe, how do you find? Guilty. Tessa's mother collapsed in sobs. On the charge of attempted murder of Diane Kellerman, how do you find? Guilty. I felt nothing. Just numb. They went through all the charges. Conspiracy. Fraud. Forgery. Guilty. 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 23 separate counts. 23 guilty verdicts. Ethan's face never changed. He just sat there, impassive, as his life was essentially ended. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd presided over the trial with iron control, looked at Ethan with something close to disgust. "Mr. Kellerman, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered someone as remorseless as you. You killed a young woman for trying to expose your crimes. You planned to murder your own mother for financial gain. You have shown no capacity for rehabilitation, no understanding of the pain you've caused." She sentenced him to life without possibility of parole on the murder charge, plus consecutive sentences on the other counts totaling another 80 years. He would die in prison. There was no doubt about that. As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. And he smiled. Not a warm smile. Not even an angry one. Just a cold, knowing smile that said, "Asterisk, you think this is over, but I'll always be with you. You'll never be free of me. Asterisk." Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd carry this for the rest of my life. But at least he'd carry it from behind bars. You'd think that would be the end of the story. That once Ethan was convicted and sentenced, I could somehow move on with my life, find closure, maybe even find peace. But life doesn't work that way. The media attention didn't stop. If anything, it intensified after the verdict. I was invited onto talk shows, offered book deals, contacted by producers who wanted to turn my story into a Lifetime movie. I declined it all. This wasn't entertainment. This was my life, my trauma, and I wasn't going to package it for consumption. But other people had no such hesitations. Within a month of the trial, there were 2 competing podcasts about the case. Within 3 months, a true crime documentary premiered on a streaming service. I didn't watch it, but Patricia did and reported back that it was mostly accurate but sensationalized. I became that woman. The one strangers recognized at the grocery store, in restaurants, at the gym. Some approached me with sympathy. Others with morbid curiosity. A few with judgment. I still got occasional messages on social media suggesting I must have done something to make Ethan turn out that way, that good mothers don't raise murderers. Those messages used to destroy me. Now I just delete them. The financial recovery took longer than anyone predicted. Brenda worked tirelessly, but unraveling Ethan's fraud was like pulling on a thread that led to a dozen more knots. Every loan he'd taken out in my name had penalties, interest, legal fees. The creditors didn't care that I'd been a victim of fraud, they wanted their money. I ended up having to sell the house. Even with the fraudulent mortgages eventually dismissed in court, the legal costs had drained what equity remained. The place sold for less than it was worth. Buyers are wary of murder houses, even when the murder was only attempted, and after paying off the legitimate debts and Brenda's fees, I had barely enough left for a modest down payment on a small condo. It wasn't the house Thomas and I had built our life in, but maybe that was for the best. Too many ghosts there anyway. The life insurance money, the whole reason Ethan had wanted me dead, went to a victims fund I established in Tessa Wolf's name. It felt right somehow, using his intended murder weapon to help other families destroyed by violent crime. Patricia suggested I see a therapist. I resisted at first. I'd spent so many years in therapy with Ethan, so many sessions trying to fix our relationship, that the thought of sitting in another clinical office made me ill. But she wore me down, and I found Dr. Sarah Chen, a trauma specialist who worked with victims of family violence. "You need to understand this wasn't a failure of love," Dr. Chen told me in one of our early sessions. "You can't love someone into being a good person. That's not how it works. Ethan had a pathology that existed independent of anything you did or didn't do." Intellectually, I understood that. Emotionally, that was harder. "I keep thinking about all the moments I could have intervened," I told her. "When he was cruel to that cat. When he got into fights at school. When he asked for money and I gave it to him. What if I'd been stricter? What if I'd gotten him different help? What if he'd been born with a different brain?" Dr. Chen countered. "You can play what if forever, Diane. It won't change anything. What will help is accepting that you did the best you could with the information you had. You loved your son. You tried to help him. That he was incapable of receiving that love or using that help isn't your fault." I went to therapy every week for 8 months. Slowly, painfully, I started to accept what she was saying. Started to understand that I'd been a victim long before that flight. A victim of manipulation, gaslighting, emotional abuse. Ethan had been systematically destroying me for years. The murder plot was just the culmination. But I also started to rebuild. I went back to teaching, taking a part-time position at a community college teaching English composition. It felt good to be in a classroom again, working with students who actually wanted to learn, who saw education as an opportunity rather than an obligation. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years, women I'd taught with, neighbors from when Ethan was young. I'd isolated myself so gradually I hadn't even noticed, but Ethan had encouraged that isolation, made me feel like no one else understood, like he was the only family I needed. Patricia and I grew closer than we'd ever been. She visited often, and I flew down to Arizona when she had her second hip replacement follow-up. We talked about our childhood, our parents, the ways family shapes and scars us. It helped. Linda Parrish and I stayed in tentative contact. She'd pled guilty to conspiracy and received 2 years of probation plus 1,000 hours of community service. Southwest Airlines fired her, of course, and she struggled to find work with a criminal record. But she was sober, attending meetings, and volunteering at a rehab center, sharing her story with other addicts. She sent me a letter 6 months after the trial. Dear Diane I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not writing to ask for that. I just wanted you to know that I think about you every day. I think about the life you should have had, the son you deserve to have, and I'm sorry that my failures contributed to your pain. I've been doing a lot of work in therapy about my role in creating Ethan's pathology. The drugs, the instability, giving him up, choosing the wrong father. My therapist keeps telling me the same thing you said, that I can't take full responsibility for his choices as an adult. But it's hard not to wonder. The truth is, I think Ethan was always going to be what he became. His father was a sociopath. I'm an addict. The genetic deck was stacked against him from the start. And then the early childhood trauma, the foster care, the abandonment issues, it was a perfect storm. That doesn't excuse what he did. Nothing excuses that. But maybe it explains it. I hope you're finding peace, Diane. You deserve it more than anyone. Linda. I wrote back. Not right away, it took me 2 weeks to find the words. But I wrote back. Linda. Thank you for your letter. You're right that explanations don't equal excuses, but understanding the why does help somehow. I want you to know that while I can't fully forgive you, not yet, I don't hate you. You were a victim of Ethan too, just in a different way. And in the end, you made the choice that saved my life. That matters. I hope you're finding peace too. We both need it. Diane. We exchanged a few more letters over the months that followed. Tentative, careful communication between two women forever linked by the worst person in both our lives. 9 months after the trial, I got a call from Detective Winters. Mrs. Kellerman, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Ethan has been giving interviews from prison. My stomach dropped. What kind of interviews? True crime podcasts, mostly. He's claiming he was wrongfully convicted. That you manipulated the evidence, that Linda was the real mastermind and framed him, that Tessa's death was an accident he tried to cover up out of panic. He's very convincing, apparently. Some people are starting to believe him. I closed my eyes. Of course he was. Ethan would never stop trying to control the narrative, to make himself the victim. There's nothing I can do about that, is there? Not legally. He has the right to tell his story, even if it's completely false. I just thought you should know in case people start approaching you about it. They did. Reporters wanting my response to Ethan's claims. True crime enthusiasts who'd been convinced by his story demanding I explain myself. Internet sleuths who'd decided I was the real villain and started posting conspiracy theories. I ignored all of it. Refused to engage. Dr. Chen helped me understand that I didn't owe anyone an explanation, that the verdict spoke for itself, that people who wanted to believe Ethan would believe him regardless of facts. But it was exhausting. Just when I thought I could move forward, something would pull me back. A news article. A social media post. Someone recognizing me and asking, "Aren't you that woman whose son tried to kill her?" Yes. Yes, I was. I would always be that woman now. A year after the trial, on the anniversary of that terrible flight, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went back to the airport. Patricia thought I was crazy. Why would you put yourself through that? Because I need to, I said. I need to prove to myself that I can. I didn't fly anywhere. Just went to the terminal, walked through baggage claim, stood at Carousel 3 where I'd confronted Ethan. It was just an airport. Just a place where people traveled, reunited, said goodbye. The horror that had unfolded here existed only in my memory now. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, just breathing, feeling the weight of that day and then consciously letting it go. I couldn't change what happened. Couldn't undo any of it. But I could choose not to let it define me forever. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Diane Kellerman? A young woman's voice. Yes. Who's this? My name is Rachel Stokes. I'm calling because my brother was just arrested for trying to poison our mother. And the detective on the case told me about you. About what happened to you. I don't know if you do this, or if you even want to, but her voice broke. I don't know how to deal with this. How to accept that my brother is a monster. I thought maybe you could tell me how you survived it. I stood there in the parking garage, keys in hand, and felt something shift inside me. Maybe this was how I survived it. Not by forgetting, not by pretending it didn't happen, but by using it. By helping others who were walking the same nightmare path I'd walked. Where are you? I asked Rachel. Can we meet for coffee? We could. And we did. And I told her everything. The denial, the guilt, the slow acceptance, the rebuilding. I told her it would be hard and painful and take longer than she wanted, but that she would survive. That she wasn't alone. Over the next few months, I talked to 3 more people. 2 daughters whose sons had turned violent, and 1 father whose daughter had tried to kill him for inheritance money. Each conversation was different, but the themes were the same. The disbelief. The self-blame. The profound betrayal. I started a support group. Just informal at first, meeting at a community center once a month. But it grew. Soon we had 15 regular members, then 20, then more. People who'd been victimized by their own children and had nowhere to turn, no one who understood. The media tried to cover it, of course. Woman who survived son's murder plot helps other victims of family violence. But I refused all interviews about it. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about them. Dr. Chen called it post-traumatic growth. You're taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and transforming it into something meaningful. That's incredibly powerful, Diane. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just survival. Maybe helping others heal was the only way I could heal myself. 18 months after the trial, I went on a date. His name was Michael. He was a retired architect, like Thomas had been, which gave me pause, but Dr. Chen said it was fine to have a type, and we met through mutual friends who decided I'd been alone long enough. It was awkward and strange, and I spent half the dinner convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. But Michael was kind and patient, and when I finally told him my story, because there was no point dating someone if they didn't know, he didn't run. That's a lot to carry, he said quietly. Thank you for trusting me with it. We dated slowly. Very slowly. I wasn't ready for anything serious, might never be ready. But it was nice to have companionship. To remember I was more than just that woman whose son tried to kill her. I was Diane. Teacher. Sister. Friend. Survivor. And slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it happening, I started to feel like myself again. Not the self I was before. That woman was gone, shattered on a Phoenix runway, but a new self. Stronger. Clearer. Less willing to accept lies or manipulation or love that came with conditions. Ethan sent letters from prison. I never opened them, just sent them back marked return to sender. He had nothing to say that I needed to hear. Linda told me he'd tried to contact her too, begging her to recant her testimony, claiming he'd forgive her if she just told the truth. She'd blocked his calls and refused his letters. We'd both learned our lesson about believing Ethan's promises. The Victims Fund in Tessa's name grew. We provided grants to families dealing with violent crime, helped them pay for therapy, legal fees, relocation when necessary. Tessa's mother joined the board. Working together, we turned our shared tragedy into something that helped others. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Tessa was still dead. I still woke up some nights in a panic, convinced Ethan had escaped and was coming for me. The trauma didn't magically disappear just because I was doing good work. But it was something. It was purpose. It was meaning carved out of meaninglessness. And maybe that's all any of us can do when something terrible happens. Find a way to keep going, keep growing, keep turning pain into something bearable. 2 years after that flight, I was invited to speak at a conference about family violence. At first I said no. I still didn't want to be the poster child for this particular tragedy. But the organizer was persistent. Your story could help people understand that anyone can be a victim of this. That it's not about being weak or stupid or blind. That even educated, thoughtful, loving parents can raise children who hurt them. So I agreed. And I stood in front of 300 people and told my story. All of it. The napkin. The warning I didn't believe. The confrontation at baggage claim. The trial. The aftermath. People will ask you how you didn't see it, I told the audience. They'll suggest you must have done something wrong. And you'll ask yourself the same questions. I still do sometimes. But here's what I've learned. Love isn't supposed to hurt this way. Family isn't supposed to feel like a hostage situation. And if you're in a relationship, any relationship, even with your own child, where you're constantly afraid, constantly walking on eggshells, constantly making excuses for unacceptable behavior, you need to get out. Get help. Protect yourself. Because the person hurting you won't stop just because you love them harder. The standing ovation surprised me. So did the number of people who approached me afterward, crying, sharing their own stories of children who'd hurt them. Thank you, one woman said, gripping my hands. Thank you for making me feel less alone. That night, in my hotel room, I finally did something I'd been avoiding for 2 years. I opened the box of photos from Ethan's childhood one last time. I looked at each picture carefully, without anger or grief or guilt. Just looking. Seeing them for what they were, images of a boy who existed once but was never the person I thought he was. Then I closed the box and donated it to the prosecution's archives. Let them keep it. Let it be evidence, documentation, a cautionary tale. I didn't need it anymore. Now, sitting here 3 years after that flight, I can tell you that healing isn't linear. There are still hard days. Still moments when something triggers a memory and I'm right back on that plane, feeling Linda press that napkin into my palm, hearing her desperate whisper, "Pretend to be sick. Get off this plane." But those moments are less frequent now. Less consuming. I have my teaching. My support group. My friendship with Patricia, stronger than ever. My tentative relationship with Michael, which has grown into something real and tender and healthy. My volunteer work with the Victims Fund. I have a life. Not the life I planned, not the life I thought I'd have. But a life nonetheless. And I have this story, which I've finally decided to share completely, to let others learn from. Not for fame or money or attention. But because somewhere out there, there's another mother or father sitting on a plane, being handed a napkin or hearing a warning or feeling that first stirring of dread that something isn't right. And maybe, just maybe, they'll listen. They'll act. They'll save themselves before it's too late. That's my hope anyway. That something good can come from something so terrible. That we can all find ways to survive the unsurvivable. That love, real love, healthy love, can exist even after you've learned that sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who hurt you worst. I'm still learning that last one. Still figuring out how to trust, how to be vulnerable, how to let people in without constantly waiting for betrayal. But I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying. And maybe that's all any of us can do. Try. Survive. Heal. Help others do the same. The flight attendant whispered. I didn't listen at first. But eventually, I did. And that made all the difference. Asterisk, approx. 2,900 words, asterisk. Chapter 10. 3 years later. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 3 years and 2 weeks after that flight from Phoenix. I was sitting in my small home office, the second bedroom of my condo that I'd converted into a workspace, grading essays from my community college students when my phone chimed with a new message notification. The subject line made my breath catch, asterisk request for victim impact statement, parole hearing asterisk. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. Asterisk dear Ms. Kellerman asterisk. Asterisk you are receiving this notification as required by state law. Inmate Ethan Kellerman, number 847392, has filed a petition for early parole review based on claims of rehabilitation and new evidence. A preliminary hearing has been scheduled for May 15 to determine if the petition has merit. Asterisk. Asterisk as a registered victim in this case, you have the right to submit a written victim impact statement and/or appear at the hearing to provide testimony. Please contact our office within 30 days if you wish to exercise these rights. Asterisk. I read it 3 times, each time feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Parole. He was trying to get out. After only 3 years. 3 years for murdering Tessa, for trying to have me killed, for destroying so many lives. My first call was to Detective Winters. I just got an email about a parole hearing. Tell me this is a mistake. Her sigh told me everything. It's not a mistake, but don't panic. This is just a preliminary hearing to determine if his petition is even worth considering. The odds of him actually getting parole are essentially 0. Essentially. Diane, he was sentenced to life without parole on the murder charge. That doesn't change. What is challenging is whether some of the consecutive sentences can be modified based on, she paused. Based on claims that evidence was tampered with and witnesses coerced. He's still claiming he's innocent. He'll never stop claiming that. But it won't work. The evidence was solid. The witnesses were credible. This is just him working the system, filing motions, staying relevant. Guys like Ethan can't stand being forgotten. So I don't need to worry. Another pause. I didn't say that. I think you should submit a statement and consider appearing at the hearing. Make sure the parole board understands the full scope of his crimes and the ongoing impact. But worry about him getting out? No. That's not happening. I called Brenda next. She was less reassuring. There's something you need to know, she said. Ethan's been filing civil suits from prison. Against you, against Linda, against the state. None of them have gone anywhere. They're all frivolous, but he's been persistent. And he's found some advocacy group that represents prisoners claiming wrongful conviction. They're providing him with legal resources. What kind of civil suits? Against you. He's claiming you defamed him, that your testimony destroyed his reputation and cost him his career and future earnings. He's seeking damages of $5 million. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I don't have $5 million. I barely have $5,000 after paying off his fraud. I know. That's not the point. The point is harassment. He's trying to keep you tied to him, keep you engaged. Don't respond to any of the filings. I'll handle it all. But be aware that if this parole hearing goes forward, he's going to use it as a platform. And he'll try to make you look like the villain. Of course he would. That's what Ethan did. I hung up and sat there, staring at my computer screen, at the half-graded essays waiting for my attention. Normal life. I'd worked so hard to build a normal life. And with one email, Ethan had shattered that piece. I told Michael that night over dinner at my place. We'd been together for over a year now, and I'd learned to trust him with the hard things. You don't have to do this alone, he said immediately. I'll come to the hearing with you. It's going to be ugly. He's going to say terrible things about me. Then let him. You know the truth. I know the truth. Everyone who matters knows the truth. He took my hand across the table. Diane, you've spent 3 years rebuilding your life. Don't let him take that away from you again. He was right. But it was easier said than done. That night, I dreamed about the plane. The napkin. Linda's terrified face. Ethan's cold smile at sentencing. I woke up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced I heard someone trying to break into my condo. The trauma isn't gone. It's just sleeping, waiting for moments like this to resurface. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into preparing for the hearing. I contacted everyone who'd been part of the original case, Detective Winters, Detective Foster, Angela Reeves, who was no longer with the DA's office but agreed to help. I spoke with Tessa's parents, who were devastated by the news of the parole petition. How is this even possible? Tessa's mother asked me on the phone, her voice breaking. He killed my baby. He buried her in the woods like garbage. And now he might get out. He won't, I promised, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. We won't let that happen. Linda called me, panicked. She'd received a notification too. He's been sending me letters again, she said. Through other inmates, somehow getting around the block I put on him. They're threatening. He says if I don't recant my testimony, if I don't tell the parole board I lied, she couldn't finish. He'll what? He knows where I live, Diane. He has friends on the outside. People who owe him favors. I'm terrified. I convinced her to call Detective Winters to report the threats. But the fear in her voice shook me. Ethan, even from behind bars, was still finding ways to terrorize people. The support group I'd started wanted to help. 15 members wrote letters to the parole board on my behalf, describing how my story had helped them understand their own experiences with violent family members. Their words were powerful, moving. But would it be enough? The preliminary hearing was held in a sterile conference room at the state prison. Not a courtroom, this wasn't a trial, but an administrative proceeding. The parole board consisted of 5 members, 3 men and 2 women, all middle-aged or older, all looking tired and jaded in the way of people who'd heard too many sob stories from inmates. Ethan was brought in wearing prison khakis, hands cuffed in front of him. He'd grown his hair longer and had a beard now. It made him look older, sadder, more sympathetic. When his eyes found mine across the room, he smiled. That same cold, knowing smile from sentencing. Asterisk, I'm still here. I'm still in your life. You can't escape me. Asterisk. The hearing began with Ethan's attorney, a young woman from the prisoner advocacy group, presenting his case. She was well prepared and articulate. Mr. Kellerman was convicted based largely on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of witnesses who had their own legal problems and motivations to cooperate with prosecutors. His mother, Diane Kellerman, had a contentious relationship with him over money and control. Linda Parrish, his biological mother, had a history of mental illness and substance abuse. Derek Williams was facing his own charges and took a plea deal. Craig Holloway was a career criminal with every reason to lie. The physical evidence was ambiguous at best. She painted a picture of Ethan as a victim of overzealous prosecution, a son who'd had a difficult relationship with his adoptive mother but had never intended to harm anyone. Tessa's death, she claimed, was a tragic accident that Ethan had panicked about and tried to cover up, wrong, but not premeditated murder. I listened to this revisionist history with mounting rage. She was twisting everything, cherry-picking facts, ignoring the mountain of evidence that had convicted him. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and looked directly at the parole board members. My name is Diane Kellerman, and I'm here to tell you that releasing Ethan Kellerman, even reducing his sentence, would be a catastrophic mistake that would put lives at risk. I walked them through everything. The warning on the plane. The confrontation at the airport. The evidence discovered during the investigation. Tessa's body. The fraud. The manipulation. The threats he was still making from prison. Ethan Kellerman is not reformed, I said. He's not rehabilitated. He's exactly what he was 3 years ago. A dangerous sociopath who sees other people as obstacles or resources, never as human beings worthy of empathy. He killed one woman who threatened to expose his crimes. He tried to have me killed for insurance money. And has been using every resource available to him in prison to continue harassing and threatening his victims. I pulled out copies of the letters Linda had received, which she'd given me permission to share. Letters that violated multiple prison regulations but had somehow gotten through anyway. This is who he is. This is who he'll always be. Please don't make the mistake of believing his performance of remorse or rehabilitation. Women have already died because people underestimated what he's capable of. Don't let there be more. I sat down, shaking. Michael, who'd come as he'd promised, squeezed my hand. Others testified. Detective Winters walked through the evidence again. Tessa's father gave a statement so raw and painful that one of the parole board members had tears in her eyes. Angela Reeves explained the legal case and why the conviction was solid. Linda appeared via video call, too afraid to be in the same room as Ethan even with guards present. She recounted his manipulation, his threats, the way he twisted her desperate need for connection into complicity in his crimes. Finally, Ethan was given a chance to speak. He stood, humble and soft-spoken. I'm not the person the prosecution made me out to be, he began. I made mistakes. I panicked when Tessa died and made terrible decisions about how to handle it. I had a contentious relationship with my adoptive mother, and I said things in anger that I regret. But I never wanted anyone to die. I never hired anyone to hurt my mother. That's a fantasy constructed by people who had their own agendas. He went on like this for 15 minutes, talking about the prison programs he'd completed, the therapy he'd undergone, the remorse he felt, the person he'd become. It was a masterful performance. I could see one or two of the parole board members softening, reconsidering. And then he made a mistake. My mother, he said, looking directly at me, has suffered because she can't accept that I didn't do the things she believes I did. I hope someday she finds peace and can forgive me for whatever role I played in her pain. The condescension in his voice. The subtle implication that I was delusional, unstable, the real problem. One of the parole board members, a stern-looking woman with grey hair, leaned forward. Mr. Kellerman, are you saying your mother fabricated her testimony? I'm saying she misunderstood certain situations and... Yes or no? Did you or did you not hire Craig Holloway to kill her? A flash of annoyance crossed Ethan's face. Just for a second. But it was enough. I never met Craig Holloway. Whatever arrangement he had was not with me directly. So someone else hired him on your behalf. I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm saying the prosecution's narrative is false. But you can't explain the evidence. The phone records, the financial transfers, the searches on your computer about hiring hitmen. Those can be explained by... By what? Please, enlighten us. Ethan's mask was slipping now. I could see the rage building behind his eyes. He didn't like being challenged, being questioned. He liked being in control. I think this board is biased, he said coldly. You've already decided I'm guilty regardless of evidence to the contrary. We've decided you were convicted by a jury of your peers based on overwhelming evidence, the woman replied evenly. And nothing you've said today has given us any reason to question that conviction. Ethan stared at her, and for just a moment, I saw the real him. The monster beneath the mask. The calculation, the hatred, the utter contempt for anyone who didn't give him what he wanted. Then the mask came back. I understand. Thank you for your time. But it was too late. They'd seen it too. The parole board deliberated for less than 30 minutes. When they returned, the grey-haired woman who'd questioned Ethan delivered the verdict. After reviewing the petition, hearing testimony, and considering all available evidence, this board finds no merit to Mr. Kellerman's claims of wrongful conviction or rehabilitation. The petition for early parole review is denied. Furthermore, based on evidence of ongoing threatening behavior toward victims, we are recommending additional restrictions on Mr. Kellerman's communication privileges and a notation in his file that he should be considered a high-risk inmate for future parole considerations. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost collapsed. Michael caught my arm, steadying me. It was over. For now, at least, it was over. Ethan was led out of the room. As he passed me, he leaned in and whispered, "This isn't finished." But it was. The parole board's decision was final for at least 10 years. By then, Ethan would be in his 50s, and I would, God willing, have built a life so far removed from him that whatever games he tried to play wouldn't touch me. Outside the prison, Tessa's parents hugged me. We stood in the parking lot, crying together, grateful that justice had held, that he wouldn't be getting out. "Thank you," Tessa's mother said. "Thank you for being so strong." But I didn't feel strong. I felt exhausted. Wrung out. Ready to put this behind me once and for all. Michael drove me home. I slept for 14 hours straight, the first dreamless sleep I'd had in weeks. When I woke up, there was a text from Linda. Asterisk, did you hear? We won. Asterisk. Asterisk, we won. Asterisk, I texted back. And it felt true. Not because Ethan was still in prison, he was always going to be in prison. But because we'd stood up to him one more time and refused to be intimidated, refused to let him rewrite history, refused to let him make us doubt ourselves. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I wrote a letter to Thomas. Not a real letter, he was 7 years dead. But a letter to the memory of him, to the man I'd loved and lost and had slowly learned to let go of. Asterisk, dear Thomas, asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know if you'd be proud of me or disappointed. I like to think proud. I survived something I shouldn't have had to survive. I learned that the son we raised, the son you adopted and loved, was someone neither of us really knew. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've forgiven you for lying about Jennifer. Linda. You were trying to protect Ethan, trying to give him a fresh start. I understand that now. You couldn't have known what he'd become. Asterisk. Asterisk, I've also forgiven myself. That took longer. But I'm done carrying guilt for loving someone who wasn't capable of loving me back. Asterisk. Asterisk, I have a good life now. A small life, maybe, but mine. I'm happy some days. Other days I'm just okay. And that's enough. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'll always love you. But I'm ready to let you rest now. To stop holding on to the past and move forward into whatever comes next. Asterisk. Asterisk, thank you for the good years. They meant something, even if everything else fell apart. Asterisk. Asterisk, goodbye, my love. Asterisk. Asterisk, Diane. Asterisk. I burned the letter in my kitchen sink, watching the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. Then I washed my hands, dried them, and walked into the living room where Michael was watching TV. Want to go to dinner? He asked. Yes, I said. I really do. And we did. And it was normal and pleasant and utterly unremarkable. Which was exactly what I needed. Asterisk, asterisk, 3 months later. Asterisk, asterisk. I'm writing this from my home office, where I've been working on a book. Not a memoir, I'm not ready for that, but a guide for families dealing with violence from adult children. Practical advice. Resources. Stories from the support group. Ways to heal. Dr. Chen thinks it's a good idea. It'll help you process, she says. And it'll help others. So I write. A few hours each day, between teaching and the support group and my life with Michael and visits from Patricia. The book is almost done. I don't know if anyone will publish it. Don't even know if I want it published. But writing it has helped me understand something important. We don't owe our abusers anything. Not our silence. Not our forgiveness. Not our continued suffering. We owe ourselves healing. Peace. A chance to move forward without the weight of their crimes crushing us. Ethan is in prison. He'll likely die there. And that's where he belongs. I'm in Portland, teaching and writing and building a life that has nothing to do with him. And that's where I belong. The flight attendant whispered. I didn't listen at first, and that almost cost me everything. But I'm listening now. To my own voice. To my own needs. To the truth I denied for too long. My son tried to kill me. But I survived. And I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living. Asterisk, the end. Asterisk. Asterisk, asterisk, epilogue. Asterisk, asterisk. If you're reading this, thank you for staying with me through this journey. It wasn't easy to share, and I imagine it wasn't easy to read. If you're in a situation where you're afraid of someone you love, your child, your parent, your partner, please reach out for help. Call a domestic violence hotline. Talk to a therapist. Tell someone you trust.